In this tutorial, we'll be building a basic space chase game where we have a player, an enemy chasing the player, and a timer keeping score to see how long we can avoid the enemy. Alright, let's begin by creating a new project. Let's call this project Space Chase. I'm going to call it Tutorial for this tutorial, and let's create. When it loads up, we're going to head over to our 2D scene. We're starting in a 2D scene, and let's start with a 2D node. I'm going to click on the node 2D and change the name to main because this will be my main scene. Now we need to add our player, so I'm going to click on the plus to add a new node, and this time we're going to add a character 2D. That's going to be our player, so I'm going to click on the character 2D node and change the name to player. Let's also add an enemy node, so I'm going to click again, and this time for the enemy we're going to add a area 2D node. So I'm going to click on the area 2D, separate it from the player, and let's call this one the enemy. Now our player and our enemy need some visuals, because at the moment they're just sitting in our scene and we can't actually see them. So we're going to add a 2D sprite node. So I'm going to click on my player, add a new node, and add a sprite 2D. I'm going to do the same for the enemy. So I'm going to click on the enemy, add a new node, add a sprite 2D. And I'm going to use some spaceships for this game. So I got this 2D pack from Kenny, which has free assets on Kenny, and I'm going to be using some of the spaceships in that pack for my game. So let me go back, and I'm going to go and grab these spaceships and drag them into Godot. Now that they're added, what I can do is now I'm on my player, and I'm going to grab the player spaceship, move it over to the Sprite 2D texture, and now you can see I've added a spaceship for my player. I want him to face to the right, so I'm going to change his rotation to 90 degrees, so he's facing to the right, which will help my movement. And I'm going to move the player into the game scene, and I'll go to my enemy Sprite 2D. This time I'm going to grab my enemy texture, and I'll move it over to the empty texture box in my Sprite 2D. I want him to also face to rotate, and I'm going to rotate him minus 90 degrees, so he's facing to the right as well. And then click on my enemy. I'm going to move my enemy into the scene. So now we have the textures, but we need something to help determine if they're colliding with each other in our game. So I'm going to go over to the player, and I'm going to add a new node. And this time I'm going to add a collider shape 2D. Once I have my collider shape, I'm going to go over to the inspector, and where it says empty shape, I'm going to click there and add a new circle collider to my player. You can see a collider was added. It's very small at the moment, so let's make that bigger to cover our player as a collider, so it can detect when it's colliding with the enemy. Let's do the same to the enemy. So I'm going to click on the enemy, add a new node, add a collider, a collision shape 2D, go over to the shape, add a new circle collision shape, and then make that bigger to cover the enemy as well. So now I have an enemy and a player. Now let's get them moving. So in order to get them moving, I'm going to go click on my player and add a new script. And we're going to move our player in the script. So I'm going to click script, and then I'm going to create a new script called player. And inside the player script, we're going to keep extending the character body. We're going to start with a variable called speed. and let's add it to something like 300. We're now going to add our function for our update function that's going to run every frame in our game. So let's start with a function, and we will call the physics process function for this one. So I'll click the autofill. I'm going to go underneath, and in the physics function, what we need to do is get the player to follow our mouse. So in order to do that, we first need to rotate towards the mouse. So we're going to use the look at function. So if I click tab, it's going to autocomplete for me. You can see it's looking for a vector 2 position. So we're going to get the mouse's position using the global mouse position. So I'm going to click tab on that one, and that'll get the vector for the mouse's position. So that means I'll always be looking at the mouse. And then what we want to do is move towards the mouse. So to move towards the mouse, we're going to move local in the X position. And we're going to be moving at the speed of our speed variable times the delta, which is the delta of the physics process, which will determine a consistent speed rate based on the frames of the game, no matter which game you're running. So that's actually all we need. We're going to press Command S to save the scene. So I'm going to save it as main scene. Now I'm going to go to the 2D, and I'm going to press play. It's going to ask me if I want this to be the starting scene, and this is the only scene in our game. So I'm going to select yes, this is the current main scene. You can see we now have our player moving towards the mouse and rotating towards the mouse. So now we need to get the enemy to do the same. So let's click on the enemy. We're going to add a new script. Let's call it enemy. And this is extending the area 2D. So we're going to do the same, add a variable for speed. And the speed needs to be slower than the player. So let's set it to 200 in this instance. We will use the same function that's going to update every frame. So we will call this the process frame. And we need to look at the player. And at the moment, we've got no reference to the player. So as a variable, what I'm going to do is click on the player, drag the player into the script while holding Command, and it will add a reference to that player in our game. So now I can reference the player in my script. So just like before, we're going to be looking at the player. So let's use the look at. And now this time we're going to grab the player dot position. So that's a vector 2. So we'll always be looking at the player's position. And then we're going to move local X speed times delta to remain a consistent speed the whole game. Press Command S and press play, and now you should see the player moving towards the mouse and the enemy moving towards the player. So we have most elements to our game, but you can see when the enemy runs into the player, nothing happens. So we have our colliders or our collision shapes 2D, so we should be able to detect when the player and the enemy collide with each other. So I'm on the enemy script at the moment, and while I'm on the enemy script, I click on the enemy, and in the inspector, I'm going to go to node, and you can see that we have something called signals. So these signals are added here for the area 2D to detect collisions, and our player is a character body. So we're looking for the signal that says body entered. So that says when a body, so a character body, a static body, or a kinematic body interact or collide with an area 2D, it's going to send a signal to the game, and then we can get something to happen based on that signal. So I'm going to click on area body 2D signal. I want this to be on the enemy script. So I'm going to click on the enemy, and then I'm going to press connect. And you can see we've got a new function now that says on body enter. So that's when two things collide with each other. When a body collides with the area 2D, we want something to happen. And what we want to happen is we want the game to reload. So in order to reload the game, we're going to get the tree and then dot reload current scene, and that'll just reload the current scene when they collide with each other. So let's press Command S. Let's test this out. They're moving around, they collide, and the scene restarts. 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 Alright, so we have our enemy moving towards the player. We have our player movement. We now need to keep a count or a score of how long we can avoid the enemy. So what we're going to do is add to our main, we're going to add a new node. So I'm going to click on main, go to add 2D scene, and I'm going to add a new node called a canvas layer. And a canvas layer just means a layer of canvas that's going to sit over the top of our game. And then inside that canvas layer, I'm going to add a new node called a control node. And the control nodes are what we use for our user interface or our UI elements in our game, which is our timer or score is going to be. I'm going to rename the control node to be my heads up display or my HUD. And then you can see that my HUD is only this small orange square. So I'm going to go up to the anchors, and in the anchors, I'm going to make it a full rect, which means it'll go the whole screen. You can see the orange square has changed to be the whole screen for my control. While I'm clicked on my heads up display, I'm going to add a new node called a label. And this is where we're going to add our text. So I'm going to change the name to be my score text. And then over on the right in the inspector on the label, I can add text to simulate what it would look like. You can see at the moment it's in the top left-hand corner. So I'm just going to bring that in and down a little bit. It's going to stay there in the corner. And I probably will make it slightly bigger. So I'm going to go over to label settings where it says empty. I'm going to add new label settings and then click again into the label settings. And you can see I've got a font option. And inside the font option, I'm just going to make that twice as big to be a 32 pixel. And now on my HUD, I'm going to add a new script. Be my HUD script, and then this is extending the control. Let's set a variable for the score and set it to 0 at the start. Let's add a reference to our text. So I'm going to click and drag that into my script while I hold Command, let go, and it's going to add a reference to our score text. And then we're going to set what the text says at the start of the game. So we can use a function called ready, and that'll run once at the start when this scene is introduced into the game. And then on ready, we want to change our score text. So we're going to go score text dot text, and that's our label over here, our text label. And we want to make that equal to a string. We're going to use the quotation marks. So score colon space plus our score. Now at the moment, our score is a number, not a text. So we need to use the number to string function. That means that our text will show score plus the score in text value for our label. And then we want our score to update every second during the game as it goes up. So in order to do that, we're going to add a timer node. So I'm going to click on the main, and then I'm going to search for a new node called a timer. And this is going to be the countdown for our score, or count up for our score. So in the timer inspector, I'm going to click on our auto start. So it's counting from the start of the game. And then every second it's going to be counting. And then while I'm clicked on the timer, I'm going to click on node. And then I can use the timeout signal. So the timeout signal will happen every time we get to that 1 second that we set on our timer in the inspector. We want it to be on our HUD script. So I'm going to click on HUD, click connect, and it's connected that timer node to our HUD script. So every second that we've set in the timer inspector, we want our score to increase by 1. So it's going up by 1 in our seconds. And then we want our score text to be updated. So I'm going to click and copy the score text. And then every second our score will change, and then our text will change to indicate that the timer is going up by 1. So I'm going to click Command S to save, click play, and then at the top right, you should see that we now have a score that's going up by 1s. The enemy is chasing the player. When they collide, the game reloads. And we have our game set up. So have a play around with that very basic tutorial. You'll notice that I do have an error, and this error is occurring because in my enemy script, the scene is reloading before all the scripts are finishing. So if you are somebody who wants to get rid of that, it won't change the ability to play this game because it's a very simple game. But in order to get rid of that, what we need to do is create a new function, a custom one. So I'm just going to call this reload. And then on our reload function, what we're going to do is cut the get tree reload. And then in our on body enter, what we can do is call a deferred. So that means it won't call this function until all other scripts are finishing running what they need to do. So this will be the last thing called. And then we can call our reload function. Click save, and then you'll see now that when we play our game, we are no longer getting the error down here in our debugger. So our game will run without that, but it just takes away that error if it's annoying you in our game. So see if you can make the game, see if you can add any additions to the game to make it more entertaining. But this is the very first basic Godot tutorial game for you to complete.